All right. Good morning and afternoon, depending on where you're coming from in the country. Welcome to the Shooting Sports Coordinator Coffee. We're excited to have over 130 people signed up today. This is recorded and it'll be able to be found on YouTube. And during today's program, our moderator will actually be putting some links in the chat that will take you to some of the handouts and things to help you write your own risk management plan. So make sure that you're also watching the chat. So writing a risk management plan. This was a topic when we surveyed people and asked what topics would you like covered more in depth that have been through coordinator training. And this one was a big one. And this was way before COVID. We're talking almost a year ago when we started asking people this question. So when we start today, yes, we're going to start on writing a risk management plan, and then eventually we'll get to the state that our country is in right now, and how do we address that risk. So in writing a risk management plan, what you're doing is you're proving that you're being reasonable and prudent, that you are a trained and qualified person that is writing up a plan. And if you're not that trained or experienced, you're behaving in a manner that is going to be equal to that person that is. What I love about being reasonable and prudent is it becomes everyone's responsibility. So how does it become somebody's responsibility that maybe is a 4-H'er or a parent that has just offered to help? And the way is because you're going to share your risk management plan. Risk management plans are supposed to be active and fluid and moving to address the current risks that we're experiencing. My plan alone, I used to refer to 2, maybe 3 documents, and I'm thinking I'm up to like 6 or 8. But we'll see that when we get into the best management practices here. But by sharing that risk management plan, now all of a sudden we've elevated everybody up to handling risk. And they're operating at a level that you're at as a coordinator, a 4-H club leader, or even a discipline leader. So my name is Tammy Stewart, and I am a coordinator trainer, not only for the state of Nebraska, but also for the National 4-H Shooting Sports Committee. And a little bit about me, I'm an extension educator at the county level. And then I also am certified in the 4 disciplines that you see there on the screen. You might be thinking, wow, why is she excited about risk management? Well, I'm always excited to do anything that's going to get me to work with kids. And I know by having this plan in place and operating off of it, it allows more time for me to be with the kids. But also, I do like organizational communication, and that's why I received my degree in that, and then went on to study leadership in depth. And so that's kind of my background of where I'm coming from. Our moderator today is Scott Stewart. Scott, if you want to like wave or say something so that your screen pops up for them.
Yes, hey, good morning, everyone. Glad you are here. Thank you very much for attending today. I will be looking through the chat boxes and things like that and kind of helping out with any questions that folks may have and helping Tammy so she can focus on her stuff. So glad you're here.
So Scott is a national committee member for the 4-H Shooting Sports Committee, and he also has several levels of experience in the different disciplines that he's earned his certifications in. And he serves as a CRO at the National 4-H Championship. So he's managed a lot of risk there from a policy side as well as out on the range. My favorite part of Scott is he's a dad. You can see his daughter in the picture there with him at an archery tournament. He's also a granddad, and most importantly, he holds a license, and that license allows him to be married to me. It's a marriage license. And so if any of you are wondering if there's a connection with the last name, yes, Scott gave me my last name. So thanks to him for moderating today, and he'll be watching that chat and sharing those questions as we go along or as we take a break to answer them. So the goal today is to make risk management seem second nature to you and make the plan seem like second nature, not like a big chore. So we want to review what is the simplicity of writing this plan, and then what are the guiding documents that you'll need for your plan, and what are some of the best practices that you'll need to write up for your Clubber County. Like Nebraska, I need tornadoes, but you might need hurricanes in Louisiana. So identifying some of those best practices, and then of course responding to reducing the spread of COVID-19 and other health factors. So a great report on the news this morning. They're interviewing a summer camp, and they said not only did they mitigate the risk of COVID-19 and have no spread and no cases, they actually had the least amount of illness they've ever had in the history of the camp by all of the steps that they had taken. So they're excited that they didn't have to send home any sick kids or anything like that this summer compared to previous summers. So hopefully, as we mitigate these risks, it'll help us with many others in the future. So take a look at this picture. So this picture was taken not too long ago. And when you look at risk management, the definition by 4-H Shooting Sports is protecting assets by minimizing the potential for negative outcome. So the assets that we're protecting here have to do with reputation, the health of the instructor, the health of the young person, the property. So I identified all of these things that have been put in place to reduce negative outcomes. So let's go through them. And if you want to pop up, and Scott, if you want to read the answers out of the chat, if they come up. The mask, what were we trying to minimize there? This one would be really easy. Scott, do you have answers in the chat?
Yeah, COVID.
COVID, yep. Okay, what about the tree? Why did I choose to set this range up near a tree, especially kind of when you look at the environment? Anybody know?
So we have some of the answers that are coming in are strings hitting masks, bow limb issues.
Okay, well, we chose.
Watch your head, shade.
Right, shade. That's why we did it, right? So the youth don't get overheated. Why did we choose to use a quiver? What negative outcome were we preventing? Well, hopefully you're saying that such as the ammo, for lack of better words, in this place are in a safe place. They're stored well. The arm guard, go ahead.
We're going on tripping on arrows, controlling ammo. A lot of the answers are dealing with sharing of equipment, so they're looking at the COVID aspect of the quivers.
Yes, and that was another one. So yeah, that's great that you guys are noticing that. So when you start looking at this picture just here, all of this was pretty much second nature to us. It's not a lot that we had to think through because it's always been a part of our plan, which was part of our training when we became certified in 4-H shooting sports. Whoops. So at this time, what we're going to do is we're going to go to an actual risk management plan that is kind of my basic template that I use when we're having an event. Scott, are you able to see the risk management plan at this time?
I can pull it up. Yes. Do you want me to?
No, I just don't know if I'm sharing my screen appropriately.
No, you're not. I do not see it.
Okay. How about that?
There you go.
Awesome. Let me make this a little bit bigger. This literally is the cover page of my risk management plan. It changed about 1.5 years ago when I was out at where we practice archery out in BB gun and air rifle, but archery practice was going on that night. And I had a certified instructor call me not long after I left. I had already made it home though. And they said, hey, by the way, pretty sure archery's unsafe tonight. This and this and this is happening. I'm like, well, what did the leader say when you approached them about that, or the range officer? I didn't, it's not my responsibility. And this was a person that is not only certified in 4-H shooting sports and certified in that discipline and knows the rules. They, for whatever reason, didn't have the courage to go approach the leaders there and let them know that they thought that evening's practice seemed unsafe. So
Hey, Tammy,
that is, go ahead.
Would you be able to make that just a little bit smaller? That page, it's bottoming out on a lot of people's screens.
Does that help, Scott?
It helps a little bit. Yeah.
More?
Yep.
Okay. So on this document then, I went ahead and changed the first page to make sure there was never a question again on whose responsibility it is for risk management. So as you look at this document, you'll see here that we have made safety as everybody's job. And
I put
that,
a link to this in the chat. So if you click that link, you can get it.
thank you, Scott. And this will also give you a template to go off of where you can just delete my information and put yours in if you would like. So we say here signing in, we've never had a problem with signing in, but that was just to remind people. But that reporting potential risk definitely came from that. And then of course, practicing ceasefire with all of our young people and all the people in attendance. So everybody knows that they can call the ceasefire. It doesn't have to be an official. And then we talk about the range rules and the 4-H rules. Because what we know from the research of the 40 developmental assets is that if a young person feels safe, they're going to be able to develop, whether it's develop life skills or develop their discipline skills. So these are the basic things we put into place so we can have fun and a learning environment for all the youth. So what does this plan look like then as we go down? It identifies what county we're in. As you can see, this was regional. And so it covered 2 counties, the date it was created. Again, I said this should be a fluid document. You might, if you have practice every Tuesday night, you're probably going to use the same risk management plan that whole time. But if you're like me and I teach camps here and I teach camps there, this information changes. Or when we're doing state trainings and we're out in Western Nebraska, which has different risks than what Eastern Nebraska has, like rattlesnakes. So if you look at this, you put the date on it, and then who created it, and then the lead contact. And in this case, it was me. And then I also have 4-H program coordinators in each of my counties. And so their information is there. You'll also notice whenever you're putting together a document like this, if it's an office phone number, you'll want to say that, or if it's a cell phone number, because we know that a lot of offices will only be staffed between 8 and 5 on weekdays. And we wouldn't want you thinking you're calling a great number and that they're going to check that voicemail on a Saturday morning or a Sunday. Usually where it says disciplines involved, where it says disciplines involved, you can type those in. What I do, because of how we use this in the county, is they're all listed there. And then you can move that up into the line, or in this case, I just highlighted them in bold print. So this was for hunting skills in an archery camp. And then the event or activity, I forgot to put, I put my name instead of the event name, so a little mistake there. We often talk about the chain of command when it comes to notifying when risks have actually happened or circumstances. And so I added this, so if you've seen this before, you're noticing chain of command is new words. And so I do serve as the 4-H educator for these counties, and that's why my contact information's there. And then I have 2 supervisors. I have a 4-H one and a regional one, so that is where their information will go. Notice anytime there's X's, you'll need to put in your information. I just did that for privacy issues today. And then our state shooting sports coordinator is Sue Pritchard. Whoops. And then as we go down here, we find emergency phone numbers. And again, your emergency phone numbers are going to look different than mine outside of 911, because when you talk about, in our case, where we call the sheriff, we also have the non-emergency line there. And then of course our hospitals. The next part of the risk management plan is the risk checklist. And again, you can have paragraphs, and a lot of state plans have this in paragraph form. But what I did is I put this into just check boxes. And so then you can go and say, yep, equipment inspected. Yes, if you're dealing with lead, that you have that sanitation site. And so you'll want to make your risk checklist. We're choosing to put our firearms 3 locks down. So if we have an outdoor to the building that we're in, into the range room, and then into our closet, that would be 3 locks down. Or maybe we have a lock on the guns, lock on the gun safe, and a lock on the door to the building. So those are the kind of things that you'll want to specify to set people up for success in following your risk management plan. And then when an incident occurs, people need to know what information they need to collect. And so by providing an incident form in your sign-in notebook or a place like that, they'll know the basic information that you're gonna need to collect. There's probably not enough room on here to write it, and that's okay. But now they have a list of things that they need to be writing on a piece of notebook paper or typing up. The next section is, what equipment are you taking to that program? And again, I travel a lot to do my archery clinics. And so the date of the clinic is going to be there. I'm the person that took it. The item is a Genesis bow, and then I'll have the serial number on there. And then when I take that back to the office manager checks it back in. So what does your program equipment log look like? Now, sometimes we'll be at a clinic, and then we'll have somebody else that has a clinic the next day, and nothing goes back to the office. And so then we do a transfer of custody. So if I'm handing this off to Scott to go do a program, this is what I would use to transfer those documents, that equipment that I had checked out. Not every county and definitely not every state allows young people to check out equipment from 4-H, and that's okay. It's okay that we don't have all the same rules. 4-H is grassroots. But in our case, we have state archery contests coming up in a couple weeks. We have muzzleloader coming up and shotgun. And we do check out equipment to new 4-Hers that have been to the right amount of practices that haven't been in long enough to figure out if they're going to purchase equipment. So this is the sheet that we also use. We put a parent guardian signature on there because we know that an adult is what stands up if something would happen versus a youth signature. But the youth signature goes back to positive youth development and giving them ownership and responsibility and reading through that document. In your discipline and club instructor manuals, it says that you need to log everybody in. So this sheet is just made it really simple where they log in and they just simply check over to the side if they're a 4-Her, a guest, or a shooting sports coach. The top part there where it says what will 4-H members do and what will they learn, that's the lesson plan. Now, would you want to teach from this lesson plan? No, but this is what if insurance needed to come back, like if you had a young person that tripped and broke their arm, they might come look at your lesson plan to see if the young person was on task and what you had said they would be doing at that night's practice or at that camp. And then again, keeping it simple at the bottom, checking down that the range rules were reviewed and who reviewed those. And it just keeps everybody making sure they know what to do. So those are your basics of a risk management plan. Seems pretty simple to me. I don't know what you guys are thinking at that time, but now we're going to go into best management practices. Scott, are there any questions we need to address at this time on writing the plan?
Nothing's in the chat yet.
Okay. So earlier I had mentioned that there's going to be some documents that you follow. The list of documents up here are the ones that we're following. A, B, and C used to be the only ones on my plan. And now that Nebraska has opened up for 4-H clubs to start meeting again, I have my district health department's recommendations, my universities, and our state 4-H office on 4-H meeting guidelines. So those are all things that we're going to use and respect so we can go work with the youth and have that liability backing of our university. So normally what's in my best practices are these 6 things here. And again, they're fluid. So as different situations come up and our parents or our leaders say, hey, I want to know how to handle if there's lightning. Like, do I have to cancel? Do I have to secure the kids? Can they go to their cars? That type of stuff. And so we start adding, what are those best practices? They might not be 100% research based, but it's giving direction to the people that need and want to know, what do I do if this risk presents itself? So you can see here for injury or death, we actually say, you need to call for help, secure the safety of the people in the areas. And then they actually asked for a script on what would that look like if I had to call somebody and tell them that their child broke their arm. which happened to our daughter at 4-H, by the way. And the 4-H leader had to call and tell us, by the way, we think she broke her arm. Interesting situation. And then again, you'll notice on number 4 there, it says notify that chain of command list. And that's why it's really important to have the chain of command list updated, make sure you have current phone numbers for people. Then when we get to the next part, it's for weather. Now, when you went through your initial training, you learned that you could avoid risk, you could transfer risk, you could assume risk. We're doing a little bit of transferring risk here by saying, make sure you study weather.gov, right? That you're gonna have an understanding of what to do in different severe weathers. So we talked about the weather warnings here. And basically, if you have a warning, cancel the event or postpone it till it's safe, right? What about lightning? You were out at the 4-H championships in Nebraska, you know we had a lightning delay. Well, how was that decision made? Well, it goes back to the risk management plan where it says wait 30 minutes after a lightning strike is visible to the eye or thunder is heard by the ear. A lot of people were checking their phones that day saying, well, there's lightning here and here, but we couldn't see it or hear it. So we made sure that the electronic version wasn't necessarily the one we had to use. Otherwise, I don't know that we would hardly ever get started. And of course, we experienced a lot of floods last year in Nebraska. And so this was a new one that we also added because we had flooding that had places that had never flooded before. And what do you do for rain? Because sometimes it's okay to shoot in the rain, but other times, if it's going to impede in their sight or be unreasonably safe, then you go ahead and, in this case, you postpone or cancel. And lost group members. At what point do you actually call the authorities? That was a big question I had. And so this is what we typed up and came up with best practices for this. And then of course in fire, well, it depends on what's on fire. Is it somebody's clothing? Is it an item or a facility? So again, it was walking people through what do you do in each of those situations? Is it okay for me to grab the fire extinguisher or do I immediately have to get out of the building? This is one that nobody has seen yet. I just met with our sheriff's department yesterday, and there's been a lot of talk about this for several years as we've done the coordinator class nationally. And in visiting with my sheriff's office in my one county, this is what we came up with. But they also stated that, by the way, we want to help you write the one if it's 8 to 12-year-old BB gun practice in a building versus mainly our high school shotgun program that's out at the shooting range south of town. And so this will get very specific once we actually get to the point of where is the event being held, and they want to know the age of the kids and also what type of firearms might be present. But the deputy that is trained in this was very, very clear and said he definitely wanted this in big words, do not try to be a hero. And so this walked people through what you need to do, and especially when law enforcement arrives on the scene. And now we get to COVID. So Scott, before we get into COVID, any questions or thoughts in the chat we should be capturing?
Yeah, one of the questions that came through is for your list of weather, fire, or lost persons, what resources did you use to create these steps? And I'm sure probably for any of those, what are some of the resources you found and are getting to put together these lists?
Good point. I should put this on there, especially when I'm sharing this out nationally. Thanks for reminding me of that. So I believe the American Camping Association is where I got some of it. And then talking to our local first responders and weather watchers. I was trying to think which else. Those are kind of the ones that I felt like I had to look up and study a little bit. And then some of them I developed with people sitting there of how do we want to handle this, such as my staff or a key volunteer. But the American Camping Association has some really good resources. So and if you have 4-H camps in your state, I would see what they have for risk management, because you might be able to do a lot of copying and pasting. All right, any other questions before we talk about COVID? When we look at COVID-19 or the different things that can be spread, whether it's the common cold, um, influenza, those type of things, it depends on, right, if it's an airborne, if it's blood transfer, if it's, there's a lot of different ways that we share our germs with each other. And so when you start thinking about these resources, COVID-19 at some point is going to be managed. Um, and how can we put together almost a health plan of some healthy practices that we can have, such as increasing hand washing when you arrive at practices and things like that. So what we've put together for reducing the spread of COVID-19 is hold it online if possible. If we're going to be playing a Jeopardy game about the different parts of the gun or the firearm, we can play Jeopardy on a Zoom, right? So if we can hold that online, let's do it, right? So we just reduce the amount of people coming together. But if it is one of those things that it is a new BB gun beginning program, we need to get the kids together so they get to know each other, we get to know the parents, and really start sharing some things, then we're going to have to get ready for that event. So the biggest thing with COVID is you're going to need to clear it with the person above you. So if I'm going to have over 50 people, I have to go like 4 levels above me to get my plan approved. But if it's under 50, I'm just going to simply go to the person next to me in the chain of command. But no matter what, that next person is going to help me through any other steps I need. So figure out who is in that chain of command with you, and then go to them and clear that event to make sure. When you advertise that event, put your expectations on there. If they have to have a mask, put that on there. If they need to bring their own hand sanitizer, those kind of things, make sure that it's on the advertisement so they know ahead of time what is going to be expected. And then anytime you can limit the people in attendance, do it. So no spectators in this, right? You get to bring a guardian with you, but no little brothers, sisters, or anybody like that gets to hang out at the practice. And then if you have a large group, assigning times or shifts so we don't have people coming and staying the whole time. They come and they leave, and then the next group comes in. There needs to be a person that is trained for however you're going to screen people for fevers, for coughing, any of that. So train that person or volunteer right at that check-in before they even get a check-in, and ask about the COVID symptoms, and then ask them obviously to either leave or set aside if they're not feeling well, so we don't expose everybody else. We have the hand sanitizer stations at County Fair this year. We actually passed out spray bottles, so everybody had their own little bottle of hand sanitizer that they could sanitize themselves before going in the ring. And then of course, having masks available, especially if we start seeing somebody not feeling well, we're going to want everybody masked up if you haven't already required that. Next month on Coordinator Coffee, we're actually going to talk about range setups and how you can set up that 6 foot apart and still have your coaching box that gives you a nice view of that young person. And then marking those lanes, and then how do you go ahead and decide who gets to come if you don't have that much room to have enough lanes 6 foot apart that they could accommodate, like if you have 40 young people that show up. So we have how all the steps that you're going to take ahead of time. Again, this is going to seem cumbersome at first until it becomes habit. And then during the event, again, as they're signing in, we're asking them about their symptoms or their exposure to COVID-19. And we're actually going to stop, say the 4-H pledge before we start shooting, and have everybody sanitize their hands, double check their masks. We're going to make sure all the equipment has been sanitized and show them, because we actually have them sanitize their own equipment when they're done, because we do a lot of shared equipment. And then practice the 6 foot social distancing. And the way I do that is you put your arms straight out and your hands shouldn't touch people next to you with their arms out too. So that kind of gives the kids a visual of what 6 foot might look like. And then we're going to schedule breaks for hand washing. And then anytime that the young person has sanitized that equipment, it has to sit, and it always goes back in that same place. It has to dry before the next young person And then of course, afterwards, we're disinfecting in the same way. I had mentioned earlier that Larry from New Hampshire had sent me a document, and it was nice because it was talking about, testing your equipment and not using bleach, but what you do use, like your alcohol, go ahead and test that in a small spot to make sure it's actually going to work. Part of what has changed for us is our 4-H shooting sports leaders, they always kept their sign-in sheets until county fair time, and then we use that to verify the number of practices. But now we have to have those turned in right away because our health department wants them for contact tracing. So if there would be an outbreak, we'd be able to go to it right away. And we're not trying to get a hold of a 4-H leader to find out where their sheets are and who was at practice that evening or at that event. So that's a little bit different for us. So Scott, what are we seeing for comments and chats?
Sorry, I forgot I muted myself. So what we're seeing is some of the things like you had said, that when they were looking at resources, we looked that they worked with their 4-H camps and worked with them. One of the questions is, do we have any suggested resources to look at for the proper sanitizing of equipment to ensure damage is not done to it? Specifically looking for information on wood stocks for rifles and shotguns.
Scott, would you be willing to take that question?
Sure. So as far as resources to look at, you can look at pretty much any of your gun cleaning or your gun foundations, or the National Shooting Sports Foundation has got some good stuff on it. But honestly, with, wood stocks for your rifles and shotguns, as long as they are sealed correctly, because they should have that finish on them for the wood, just an alcohol wipe works really well. If you think about it, with our muzzle loading equipment, that's exactly what we use to clean everything with. And we'll include a 50-50 mix of the the Murphy's oil soap and alcohol, 80% denatured alcohol. So then we use that to clean all that equipment, and it works just fine. So the alcohol isn't going to hurt it. What it does is it actually kills the virus, and it evaporates so quickly you're not going to cause damage. Unless, you soak it in a 5-gallon barrel of it overnight, then we might have another problem. But just wiping things down with a little bit of alcohol wipes and sanitizing it should not cause the damage.
I noticed Robert had said try to run the sign-in at a distance. Absolutely. When we have shared pens and pencils, we have the person at the sign-in hand, a person, if we're going to have them sign in instead of us signing them in, we hand them that pen, and then they put it in an empty soup can. And then we know that those pens need to be disinfected. So we go through like 40 pens if we have 40 youth there. So absolutely, really think about those common touch surfaces and how to eliminate them. If you have to share them, how you're going to disinfect them. Tim says that
so as far as spraying equipment or wiping, it depends on how long you have. Every virus or every bug, depending on what it is, after you spray it with something, it has a certain amount of time that it needs to set on there, so before it is no longer contaminated, right? So what we usually do is we wipe, because a lot of things, it may require 30 seconds, right, before you kill the bug, or maybe a 5-minute or even a 10-minute. So what we do is we wipe, because it has to stay wet for that long, before a certain amount of time before that bug dies. So when you wipe it, basically that bug gets on that wipe, and when you throw that in the trash, it stays wet, and over time then it will die on that wipe in the trash. If you have time to spray the equipment down that it will stay wet long enough that it will kill the bug, you could definitely do that. We just don't usually have that kind of time when we're sharing equipment at a class. So.
Great.
There was a question of what YouTube page these coffee hours we posted on. All the recordings and everything are all posted on the National 4-H Shooting Sports Committee's the new website. So 4-H shootingsports.org. If you go under instructor resources, go to the coordinator, all of the PowerPoints, the recordings, and all that are there to include this risk management plan. That link that I gave you to that risk management plan, that will be up there also. So when I get them, the recordings and stuff from like Tammy or Dave, whoever does that and that information, I put that up on the website. if you want, I can put that link. I'll put that link to that site in chat too. So
That would be great. Thank you, Scott. And we know that our 30 minutes is pretty much up. I do have 2 ending slides to share with you. And this one here is just a reminder that the kids need us. And sometimes, no matter what, we need to be social with our 4-Hers. And we just need to remember, whether that's on Zoom or when they come in, remember to give the air high fives, the air hugs, that kind of stuff, because we don't.
looks like Tammy probably froze a little bit.
Oh, can you hear me now?
There you go.
So you want to remember to be physically distant and socially present for our young people. Now more than ever, they need us. And so with that, we will go ahead and turn it over to any other questions or discussions that people want to have. For those of you that need to get off, please know that we appreciate you attending today.
So we have a question: is what about masks while they are shooting? Do we make them shoot in the mask? So some of this, let's see, nope, I'm not frozen. Some of that's going to depend on what your social distancing is, of course, and then what your state requires. You know, if you can stay the 6 foot apart, that's saying that the masks isn't really necessary. Most of your 4-H shooting sports things can be shot with a mask on. The one I would have a little bit of concern on would be the archery aspect, because of that string grabbing that mask and trying to, you know, rip it off their face. So that one, we definitely want to maintain a 6 foot separation. If you have a mask like Tammy's going to show you, that's a full thing that you can put up over, you know, where it doesn't have a chance to catch on. That, and if it was tighter, might not be such a bad thing on the archery end, you know, because she can keep her hair in it and everything behind it. Think of it like a chest guard, right? In archery, that string should be able to slide across something like that. But again, 6 foot separation, you probably wouldn't really have to worry about a mask aspect. That's my opinion. That's kind of what we're going off of. So
we actually have towns in Nebraska that are mask required. So if you're in a certain town in Nebraska, you're going to have to do masks. But we did use these for our archery camp, and they worked really well. The kids didn't have any problem, but I would not put a mask on that goes around the ears or has any strings or anything like Scott mentioned. So